Previously on the Modoc War, the U.S. Army has assaulted Captain Jack's stronghold and things, well, could have gone better. Now the U.S. government changes its strategy. Will the government persuade the Modocs to return to their reservation? Will the Modocs convince the government to leave them alone in their homeland? Maybe some other third thing? Definitely some other third thing. First, let's take stock of the Modoc tribe at this point in the war. It's important to remember their attitudes about the war exist across a broad spectrum. On the one hand, you have people following Old Shanchan, who are dedicated to peaceful living at almost any cost. They haven't even left the Klamath Reservation. At the other end are extremists like Curly-Headed Doctor and Shanchan John, Old Shanchan's brother. Curly-Headed Doctor is the Modoc's medicine man and spreads a belief that if the Modoc defeat the soldiers, then the white people will leave the area forever. The Modoc will be able to live like the old days. Shanchan John remembers Ben Wright. Enough said. So where does Captain Jack fit in on this spectrum? Well, somewhere in the middle. Captain Jack doesn't hate the white folks, far from it, and his followers have been living all winter in caves with limited food, water, and fuel for fires. But he's tired of being jerked around on the reservation, and he will not go back. Plus, he's got a pretty sweet defensive position and has proven how good the Modoc warriors are at fighting. Captain Jack's hope is that he can work some sort of deal so his people can get their own reservation in the area. If he can do that, Captain Jack has no reason to resist. He wins. In the days after the Battle of the Stronghold, two main conclusions are reached. First, Frank Wheaton is relieved of command, some believe unfairly. Colonel Wheaton believes he'll get called back to the field when things go active again. The Army's more, don't call us, we'll call you. Wheaton's commanding officer, Colonel Alvin Gillum, 1st U.S. Cavalry, is selected to take charge. Second, the U.S. government changes its course of how to deal with the Modocs. In Washington, D.C., a delegation from Oregon tells the Secretary of the Interior the Army shouldn't be handling the Modoc problem, civilians should. In their words, a peace commissioner should hasten to the scene of trouble as coming from the great father of all the people, both whites and Indians, with full authority to hear and adjust all the difficulties. The Secretary agrees, remember, peace policy, and selects Alfred Meacham to head the commission. He's a logical choice. He knows the Modoc and he got Captain Jack to go back to the reservation once before. The Peace Commission goes through some roster changes through the next couple months, but by early February, its members are heading toward the lava beds. Also heading toward the lava beds is Brigadier General Edward Canby himself, the highest-ranking soldier in the Pacific Northwest. General Canby has been an officer for almost 4 decades and fought in wars across the country. Wyoming Traveler has a video series about General Canby's campaign in New Mexico during the Civil War. I'll link to it. By the middle of February, everybody's in place to start putting some feelers out to the Modocs still in the lava beds. One of the first to meet with the Modocs is John Fairchild, the same guy with the ranch who had led the California militia at the Stronghold battle. Along with Bob Whittle, a local rancher, Bob's Klamath wife Matilda, and One-Eyed Dixie, a Modoc woman, he goes to the lava beds and tells Captain Jack about the Peace Commission. Captain Jack agrees to a ceasefire, no hostile acts. He also asks for Elijah Steele and Judge Roseborough to come and meet with him. Along with Steele and Roseborough, other people want to meet with Captain Jack. News of the Army's defeat by the Modoc is swept through the country, and newspaper reporters are showing up to scoop the story. The New York Herald sends Edward Fox, who follows a group into the lava beds and scores an interview with Captain Jack himself, with Scarface Charlie interpreting. Back east, the story of plucky Modoc resistance in the face of Klamath bullying and government indifference sparks sympathy for the Modoc cause. This is America. Everybody loves a good underdog story. Steele agrees to meet with the Modoc, and along with John Fairchild and a few others, he travels to the stronghold in early March. When he returns to the Army camp, he yells that there will be peace. But Fairchild corrects him. See, Steele got it wrong. The Modoc have only agreed to hear the Commission's demands, not to surrender. That's a big miscommunication, and it gives the Modoc reason to doubt this whole negotiation thing. Nearby, the Commission's lineup is finalized. Alfred Meacham, Chairman. Leroy Dyer, Indian agent in charge of the Klamath Reservation. 59-year-old Dr. Eleazar Thomas, a California minister. And finally, General Canby, first as an advisor and later as an official member of the commission. The commissioners finally meet with the Modoc on a level area west of the stronghold, where they agree a tent should be erected for some shelter. Nothing really comes of the meetings. Remember Frank and Toby Riddle from Part 1, Wainema? Well, almost daily, they ride to the lava beds to keep up the line of communication between the Modoc and the government. They're uniquely suited to be go-betweens. Frank has lived with the Modoc for years since he married Toby. And Toby, she's the chief's cousin. Nobody would dare lay a finger on her. At one point, the Modocs seem to agree to surrender, and wagons are sent out to transport the women and children. But the wagons come back empty. The Modocs say they aren't ready to leave yet. Meanwhile, the Army camp is swelling with reinforcements. Colonel Gillem now has over 500 troops at his camp on the west side of the lava beds, and another 400 or so on the east side. General Canby earnestly wants to peacefully negotiate a surrender, but that doesn't mean he has to do it from a position of weakness. He's going to take every advantage he can get to force the Modoc to comply. He refers to it as gradual compression. So the Army camps are moved to within sight of the stronghold, where the Modoc can see the number of troops arrayed against them. This site west of the stronghold is now known as Gillem Camp. Today this area still looks like it did 150 years ago. A cavalry patrol is able to take around 30 of the Modoc's ponies. The Modocs see this as a hostile action and demand their horses back. Weren't we supposed to not be attacking right now while we're talking? Canby says they can have them back after they surrender. At the Modoc camp, the leaders are increasingly divided on how to proceed. Captain Jack's ready to surrender. The families have spent all winter living in caves, and he thinks if they surrender now, they'll be able to get their own reservation. Curly-headed Doctor and Shaunch and John still want to keep fighting. Remember, Ben Wright. A rumor spreads among the Modoc that a court in Oregon wants to indict the men who killed the settlers after Lost River for murder. Once the tribe surrenders, they'll be handed over to be hanged. Now those men for sure don't want to surrender now. Captain Jack has to incorporate all these perspectives into his decision-making, and remember, if the warriors don't like his decision, they'll disregard him. Jack's reputation as a leader will never be the same. In front of Captain Jack's cave is a large round stone known as the rostrum. It's where the tribal meetings are held. During one of these meetings, an idea is formed. Let's kill the entire peace commission. It's like cutting the head off and the body will die. In the area's native culture, if your leader's killed, you have to give up. You've lost. It's the rules. That's what the Modocs figure will happen. Captain Jack doesn't like it, and he says so. But instead of the men listening to him, he gets called out for being too soft. The argument gets heated, and at some point, someone throws a woman's woven hat and shawl on Captain Jack. Whatever your enlightened 21st century feelings on the matter, to a 19th century Modoc chief, this is a huge insult. You have to respond. After being called out, Captain Jack says that if anyone is going to kill the commissioners, it will be him. During the next meeting, if the commission insists on not budging, Captain Jack will lead the killing, starting with General Canby. During a visit to the lava beds, Toby hears about the plan from a cousin and rushes to warn Meacham and the other commissioners. According to Toby's son, Canby tells her, "Friend Toby, I thank you very much for your kind words, but where my duty calls me I go as a soldier. You see, I've got to go." Canby doesn't think the Modoc would do something so brazen, especially so close to the Army camp. Soon after, Bogus Charlie and Boston Charlie arrive at the Army camp. They bring word that Captain Jack wants to meet. The meeting is set for April 11th, 1873, Good Friday. The morning of the meeting, Frank Riddle insists the commissioners first go to Colonel Gillem's bedside, where the colonel is staying today due to illness. Frank asks Gillem to bear witness that he's telling the commissioners not to go, and he can't guarantee their safety. They decide to go anyway, but Meacham and Dyer take precautions. Both men pack Derringer pistols in their pockets. A few minutes after 11 a.m., General Canby sets out from the camp, on foot, to the meeting tent about a mile away, carrying a box of cigars as a present for the Modoc. Walking next to him is Reverend Thomas. Meacham and Dyer follow on their horses, with Frank walking alongside them. An anxious Toby brings up the rear on her horse. When they get to the tent, Meacham notices the Modoc men are armed and have set up the council fire on the east side of the tent, out of view of the camp's signal post. Meacham hangs his coat on his saddle horn and the talks begin. Toby translates the commission's words to the Modoc, and Frank tells the commission what the Modoc are saying. While the meeting is going on, an ominous event takes place on the other side of the stronghold. At about 1 p.m., First Lieutenant William Sherwood sees two Modoc men with a white flag walking toward the Army lines and goes to meet them. They want to talk to the head man in charge and ask the officers to leave their weapons behind. When Lieutenant Sherwood and Lieutenant Boyle go back out to tell the men that the commanding officer won't come out to them, the Modoc open fire on the two officers. From his vantage point on Hospital Rock, Private Charles Hardin sees the officers go down, but another officer starts leading the men to the wrong spot. Hardin's NCO tells him to go to where he last saw the officers. When he arrives, Hardin sees that Boyle is slightly wounded, but Sherwood has taken rounds in the arm and thigh. He dies 3 days later. The East Camp uses flags to signal Gillem Camp about the ambush. Colonel Gillem wants to warn the commission, but he can't just shout to them. He knows many of the Modoc understand English, so he begins writing a note to General Canby. That note will never be finished. At the meeting tent, Captain Jack asks for the soldiers to leave the area, which Canby can't agree to without President Grant's approval. Shaunch John demands a reservation in the area, either Lost River or Hot Creek. Dyer says only Washington, D.C. can authorize that. Hooker Jim goes to Meacham's horse and puts on Meacham's coat. He starts talking about how he's Meacham now. This is not how serious negotiations are conducted. This is how you egg someone on for a fight. Meacham tries to play it off and offers Hooker Jim his hat, too. Dr. Thomas drops to his knees and practically begs the Modoc men to listen to the commission's terms. Captain Jack stands up and walks behind a horse as two teenage warriors, Barncho and Slulix, appear out of a nearby ditch with rifles at the ready. While the commissioners are digesting this, Jack reappears and yells in Modoc, "All ready." He pulls his revolver and aims it directly at General Canby. Oops, misfire. Second shot goes off though, gets the general under his right eye. As Canby staggers off, Boston Charlie shoots Reverend Thomas in the chest, dropping him. Shaunch John empties his revolver at Meacham, hitting him 4 times in the face and shoulder. Frank Riddle and Leroy Dyer sprint toward the Army camp. Black Jim chases Frank and shoots at him, but gives up after a few hundred yards. Hooker Jim keeps up with Dyer, but gives up the chase when Dyer pulls his Derringer out and points it at him. Captain Jack follows Canby and shoots him again, then slits his throat. Meacham's losing consciousness now, but Shaunch John can't finish him off yet. Toby is now up, beating him with her fists. Boston Charlie and Bogus Charlie are mocking Dr. Thomas, who pleads for his life. As he begins praying, they execute him with a shot to the head. The warriors strip and plunder the 3 commissioners' bodies. Toby berates the men and tries to stop them, but it's no use. Boston Charlie grabs Meacham's hair and begins scalping him. Frantically, Toby plays the last card she has. She points toward the Army camp and yells the soldiers are coming. The Modoc don't bother to confirm her words. They grab the horses and run back to the stronghold. Toby, alone, desperately tries to stop the blood pouring out of Meacham's wounds. At Gillum Camp, the signal post sees the shooting and alerts Colonel Gillum. It takes minutes for the soldiers to form up and arrive at the meeting tent. When they do, the scene shocks them. 3 of the 4 peace commissioners lie stripped, 2 of them dead and 1 near death. Negotiations have concluded.